Somebody help me. No matter what I do, the tabs never end. Alright, this is Now It Makes Sense. Europe is being burnt to the ground by Neil Oliver from GB News. Let's hear it. What's happening? Well, I mean, I'm European, so I kind of get it, but let's see.
I wonder how many of us growing up in Europe imagined this continent would become somewhere unsafe for us in our lifetimes. Far less that it would have been deliberately made unsafe for us by our supposed leaders. Obviously, a lot of us learned at school and elsewhere about all the blood spilled over centuries on European soil. We knew that for hundreds of years, petty tyrants spilled the blood of their people in ruthless, careless pursuit of wealth and territory. We knew that in the 20th century, it all came to a head not once but twice in World Wars I and II. So we knew about all the blood and horror, about the evils of communism and of communism's fraternal twin, fascism. We knew all about it, what we were told about the Holocaust, about Baba Yar. We knew about all that, Cold War, the Gulag Archipelago, attendant horrors like the Pitești experiment. If you haven't heard of Pitești, look it up. Too many horrors to list. We knew all that, and my generation was taught never to forget. And yet here we are now, in the same old Europe, and after all that happened and all we were taught about all that happened, the place feels unsafe for me and mine. In the
His examples are obviously very grand. I mean, one simple example is me growing up in 91 in Denmark till today. And Europe in general, it just isn't the same place. And a lot has changed since. That's like a really tiny example, but it's definitely true that there has been less safety in some sense. And a lot of women have a hard time walking the streets at night in certain areas. It's a disaster.
Europe where, as I remember it from school days, we were told to speak up when we saw the smoke, the warning signs of totalitarianism, of the casual disregard of freedom, of the casual disregard of human life. In that same Europe, the same old totalitarians are back. And that Europe feels dangerous now, dangerous again. In Germany, that same Germany from which we were told came the lessons of Nazism, of Holocaust, the police are kicking in doors again. They're kicking in doors in pursuit of people who are telling the truth or just expressing opinions. But the truth and opinions the German government, subject to the globalists of the European Union, doesn't want to hear. Europe is flooded with migrants. It's not them to blame. They've been moved like pieces on a board. In many cases, their homelands have been destroyed by decades of US foreign policy, leaving them few options.
That's what I say all the time, man. If the US just would stop meddling in the Middle East, you wouldn't have such a rampant immigration into Europe. It really feels deliberate. It really does. You can call me a conspiracy theorist all you want. Just theories.
In any event, they're on the move and taking up residence in Europe, because to have them in Europe en masse, disrupting by their very presence civilizations and cultures that were millennia in the making, to have them here washing away in a few years the achievements of millennia, the identities shaped by millennia, to have them here washing away in mere moments Christianity, indigenous white populations, languages, traditions, norms, ancient cultures that endured centuries of war and other bloodshed.
Yeah.
Because to have them here replacing what was here before is the absolute undeniable objectives of those who would burn Europe to the ground to rule over the ashes.
Damn. Tough. He's not wrong.
Using the internet without a VPN, a virtual private network, is a bit like taking to the road without car insurance.
Nice car.
All it takes is one unlucky moment to cost you a lot of cash.
Did you hear that sound effect?
This video's sponsor is Private Internet Access. They are the VPN to help keep you safe. Click the link in the description below to find out why over 30 million people have downloaded PIA to protect themselves online. A virtual private network is an app that hides your IP address and helps keep your data private. When you're browsing the internet at home, you give up a large amount of data to businesses, to shops, and indeed to social media giants.
See the numbers?
Hackers have the ability to steal your personal data with ease, including sensitive information such as passwords, keystrokes, and even your personal photos. Private Internet Access helps protect your personal data by encrypting your internet connection to keep your data out of the hands of cyber criminals. And it's not just hackers either to be concerned about. Information can be censored too. When Canada passed their C-18 bill, social media giants decided to ban news content on their platforms.
And the whole thing with all this banning online and censorship just sucks. It's just totally, everyone likes to clarify it in certain terms, like, oh, it's still free speech, you just can't say this type of speech, but it's still free speech. Like, why would you allow this type? Because it's hateful, or it's conspiratorial, or it's dumb. It's like, man, free speech means all speech, okay?
But
Let's just get that
PIA
straight.
can protect your ability to consume the news and content you love. Private internet access is available for Windows users, Mac OS, Android, Linux, iOS, and you can
All
use
of
one
them.
PIA subscription to protect an unlimited amount of devices.
Man, this ad is
And
damn long.
we've got a huge GB News discount for you too.
There you
Click
go.
the link in this video's description and you'll get a massive 83% off PIA. That's under £2 a month, the price of a coffee, and
That's
you'll get an
good.
extra 4 months completely free on top. Also, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee.
I feel like the price was originally inflated to be able to provide such a discount. So hey, they're rated excellent. Go for it.
PIAVPN.com/GB News to start
Support.
protecting yourself digitally today.
If you want it. All right.
Because to see an end to the sovereign peoples of Europe has been the whole point of the globalist project. This is no accident. This is the intention. The migrant.
I mean, I have my own idea of globalist project, but what does he mean? Like, we use these terms, but it's like, who are we actually talking about?
Are the tools being used to accomplish the task. But we would do much better to ask who ordered the tools, who is using the tools.
Yeah.
And so now, after all of it, all the millennia, all the blood, and after just 2 or 3 generations of comparative peace, Europe is a place that has been rendered unsafe for those who were naive and trusting enough to imagine it would always be theirs. The police are kicking in doors to take away people who have voiced unwanted opinions.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Censorship legislation is everywhere enacted in a bid to shut us up. All of this has been done to Europe deliberately, in a few short years, by a handful of charlatans. I count Britain into this Europe, and our fate here has been charted by more of the same charlatans, sock puppets, mouthing words spoken through them by others we do not know. Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer, the whole sordid lot of them, utterly without integrity or principle or honour or character. And on mainland Europe, there's more, the likes of Olaf Scholz, Emmanuel Macron, and that's before we get to the way.
Sometimes I wonder, like, how is it that all the most annoying people come into politics? And I think to myself, you know, anyone that has a good heart or some morality, the last thing you're thinking about is getting into politics. It's probably a problem where we should be more involved, or people who are like that should be more involved with politics. But it's a tough game in there, and you got to step over other people, and you do favors for some, and to get your way. Anyone who has a good heart is not going to want to play that game, let's be honest. Or maybe not even have the heart to, or the strength to play it.
Wastes of skin that are the unelected, unwanted characters like Ursula von der Leyen. The dreadful, obscene menage was crystallised in a memorable moment when Christopher Husgen, chairman of the Europe Security Conference in Munich, burst into big bubbly tears in the aftermath of US Vice President J.D. Vance's telling Europe's pitiful premiers and hangers-on that they were censorious to a man and to a woman, and thereby driving the destruction of their own houses. That rather than listen to what their people thought and wanted, they preferred to throw them in jail or otherwise silence them for holding and expressing opinions at variance with those of the blob. And so now Europe is a place that feels unsafe for the descendants of those who lived here, worked here, helped build this place, defend this place. It's not unsafe and broken just because of the millions of illegal strangers taking advantage, as well they might, of free this, that and the other, but on account of the fact the powers that be, the powers that ought not to be, have created an atmosphere in which people descended from those that have lived here for centuries, if not forever.
Man, imagine you have your entire ancestry in some country in Europe, let's say, I don't know, Denmark, or Germany. And, well, that's a bad example because of its history, but take Denmark. You have your entire history there, super safe country, the ability to work, have a good work-life balance. You just need one job and you can make it. And then you grow up, I guess in the 90s and onwards, and you start realizing like, wow, everything, it must be one of the hardest times to grow up from, because you've seen the vision of the generation before you at its peak, and then you come into what's a lessening standard of living every year. Like I talked to some friends who are in Denmark, and the prices have just increased by more than 100%, sometimes 400%. That's bananas, man. That's just not sustainable at all. And imagine that you see that as a kid growing up, or you're now an adult, and you look at it and you're like, what the hell happened in just 20, 30 years? What the hell happened? How did it get this bad? I mean, it's probably a lot of reasons, right? And we can go into them, but it's gonna take too long. But it's like, damn, just imagine standing in those shoes. It's a weird one. It's just horrible.
Atmosphere in which those indigenous populations are supposed to live now in fear of those nominally I stress, in positions of authority over their lives.
Yeah.
Europe and Britain have been wrenched from the hands of Europeans and the British. Their cultures, traditions and histories laid waste, destroyed by globalists, those who would prefer to see all nations, all senses of national identity erased and overlain with a homogeneous monoculture which means nothing to anyone.
Totally unrelated, but I think the British and the French, they have the best humor. I think they're hilarious, both of them.
And as they say, when all else fails, they'll take you to war. Hollow men, factotums like Starmer, open their mouths for words composed by others about putting British flesh and blood in the charnel house that has been Ukraine. So discombobulated are they in their panic, in their dying as a globalist cult, they turn reflexively towards the solution that has always rescued globalists, which is war. An online headline from Zero Hedge this week had it that Denmark is set to announce massive rearmament plans. Quote, Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen said her government would announce plans on Wednesday for a massive rearming of Denmark's military due to the growing threat posed by Russia. We must upgrade massively to protect Denmark, and we must rearm massively to avoid war, Frederiksen told Parliament on Tuesday. She did not disclose any details or sums, but according to Danish public broadcaster DR...
I'll tell you something funny about the DR channel. When I was younger, it was like a mandatory thing to pay the bill, so that if you had access to a TV, a phone, or even a radio in your home, and you never even listened to that channel, you still had to pay a license fee for that channel. So what you do, because it was illegal for them to check, right? So you'd basically say, I don't have anything. I don't have a TV, I don't have a radio, I don't have a phone. And they weren't allowed to like look in your home and use that as evidence. They couldn't do that. So in the end, I never paid this dumb freaking fee. Now they have it over tax instead of bothering us with a goddamn fee. It was so annoying, man.
The government is expected to announce the creation of a 50 billion kroner fund for additional defence spending in 2025-2026. Frederiksen told Parliament the rearming would need to happen quickly amidst a difficult situation for our country, kingdom and continent.
Well, what's really the difficult situation? Please correct me if I'm wrong, if you're hearing this and I'm totally wrong. When has Putin said he's going to do any more than whatever he's doing in Ukraine? Let's just keep Ukraine as a separate thing for now. But has he said anything about doing more than that? He literally just wants NATO to stop advancing towards the east. Tell me, am I wrong? Is there like an actual threat? I don't see it, if there is. So like, what the hell is all this for? Why is the UK always so involved in these things? Also during World War II, Churchill was such an... people, I guess some people like him. I think he made some stupid freaking mistakes, considering World War II didn't have to happen if he accepted some of the peace deals. Whatever.
Denmark is currently experiencing the most dangerous situation in our lifetime. This is worse than during the Cold War, she said.
Crazy, man.
After emergency talks in Paris over the US change in policy on the Ukraine war, Friedrichsen warned that Russia is threatening all of Europe now.
How?
The war in Ukraine has been about Russia's imperial dreams, about building a bigger Russia, and I don't think they're going to stop in Ukraine.
Okay, all right. So she's hinting towards something, but is there any evidence? Sure, they want to protect themselves. Denmark is also a country of incredible conservatism and like they like safety. So maybe that even just a little bit of a threat and they're wanting to do something, or else there's a bigger motion in play here. Like, what is this, man?
She told reporters. She warned the US against attempts to agree on a fast ceasefire that would give Russia the chance to mobilise again, attack Ukraine or another country in Europe. Since the outbreak of the war in February 2022, Danish support to Ukraine has amounted to some $7.52 billion in military support and around $741 million in civilian contributions, according to the Danish Foreign Ministry.
It's a lot of money for Denmark.
Cool. So there you have it, I say. Propaganda, baseless scare stories. So yet more money can be milked from another population fed a diet of fear. Even now, when the truth is out there that the war in Ukraine was provoked not by Russia, but by decades of NATO expansion, still the myth is perpetuated of the Russian bogeyman. When all else fails, they take you to war, remember? When the COVID pandemic hoax ran out of steam, before it got them over the line into full-bore digital imprisonment of the masses, they opted for war in Ukraine. They called it a war to save democracy in a country where there was no democracy, and now propose to have the descendants...
Yo, that's the funniest thing. To save democracy in a country where there wasn't any democracy. Is that true? Actually, I don't know about the history of Ukraine, but that's hilarious if true. Well, okay. In context, nothing is funny about this, but you know what I mean.
Of those who fought and died to challenge Nazism stand shoulder to shoulder with Nazis, so that yet more money might be laundered through that benighted place where a freshly slaughtered million souls lie cold in the clay.
Yeah, like nothing.
Shameless is too small a word to describe the disgrace of those we are supposed to acknowledge as leaders. And yet here we are, watching the likes of Starmer and Macron embrace each other as they dream of condemning yet more young flesh to the meat grinder so that their masters might live to lie another day. I ask you, in all seriousness, who, even on their worst and weakest day, would answer the call to war of a creature like Keir Starmer? This war in Ukraine is and always has been a war for money, a war for power. And all the while, Europe and Britain have been undone, and deliberately, by those for whom Europe and Britain are utterly expendable. Worse than that, Europe and Britain, standing as they have, at least for a while, for freedom, have been a thorn in the side of those who would enslave humankind. No less than that is at stake here and now. Either we preserve our freedom in the face of these would-be tyrants with their Nehru jackets and crocodile tears, or we watch yet more young men herded into the meat grinder to ensure the rich stay rich and the powerful stay powerful. Europe was a safe place for a while, at least some of it, for some of us. We turned blind eyes and deaf ears while the powerful sacrificed the rest of the world. Now all of that wider world has come home to roost. Europe and Britain are in the crosshairs of destruction. The surviving collateral damage of the world are here now, and the lives of ordinary people are destroyed or turned upside down as a result.
Damn.
Hopefully some of the lies parroted by bought and paid for media are being exposed now. Maybe this time people will see that war in Ukraine was driven by lying propaganda, that the threat to the safety of Europe and Europeans comes not from Russia, but from the globalists here at home. Globalists in their death throes, but ready and eager to take our children down with them. I wonder how...
Damn. Some tough, but very much needed words, let's be honest. Let's read some comments. I'm European, so it's just tough to think about this stuff all the time, you know. Especially for the UK. Some amazing people there. We've been totally betrayed, that's correct. Angela Merkel of Germany has a lot to answer for. The one phrase that makes me so angry is white privilege. I'm not, and neither were my parents or grandparents. Yeah, the whole idea of whiteness in general or white privilege is such a such a convoluted one. No one understands. Like you can't just group all white people together and say that every single white person had privilege. Have you been to Eastern Europe during Bolshevism? You're joking, right? You know where the original word of slaves comes from? Man. This betrayal of Western peoples is so sinister and evil, almost unimaginable how horrible the situation is. Yeah, I really feel bad for... I love Europe, really. The amount that has been accomplished there, the beauty of the lands, the Mediterranean Sea is my favorite. And the food culture, the cultures in general, really just has been absolutely shat on. Unfortunately, millions are still aware of what's going on. Nobody in my family will listen to me as they're too busy watching TV. Are they paying the license? They usually tell me to give it a real rest and stop going on. I mean, look, I do have a point. There is a point about blissful ignorance to a certain degree, because goddamn, if we just focus on all the negativity that's going on in the Western world, it really is difficult to have any form of hope whatsoever. So you need to just tell yourself, okay, you know what? Let's take a step back and just look at it from a bird's eye view. There are definitely issues and the trend is disturbing, but what can I personally do to just move forward? We need to think like, we need to keep going, you know, somehow. Doesn't mean we need to ignore things. I know blissful ignorance is literally that, but there's no need to ignore things, but don't let it, I guess, boggle you down too much. Maybe let it guide you towards doing things that are more right for you and the people around you. Maybe that helps. I hope our people unite. I agree. Don't go to war, boys. The enemy is in our own land. Don't go to war. Not for stupid things like this. Soldiers of UK, do not let them go. Let you go to Ukraine. Must stand your ground and say no. Exactly. Let's see. I guess they're mainly speaking about the UK, obviously, right? Anyone who hasn't woken up by now is in a hell of a shell shock. Yeah, that's what we hope is not going to happen. But you have to realize sometimes you need extraordinary bullshit for people to actually think, you know what the hell's going on? Too much blissful ignorance is just walking into a fire. And then when you hit the fire, you finally want to do something about it, right? And once, this was never an accident. Ask any politician. I grew up in, this was cool. I grew up in Germany in the 80s. We didn't know how good we had it. It's beyond words what's going on. Not in a million years did I think they would betray us like that. The idea, yeah, so I grew up in the 90s, so it probably was great in the 80s, maybe even better. But 90s in Denmark, right? Man, not only was the weather better, funny enough, it was safe. Of course there are issues, even in the 90s, of course, but it's not like today. The idea of sending our young, so Denmark is actually a pretty good example because they're still doing pretty well, like in terms of a lot of things. And maybe whatever downfall they might have comes slower than some of the bigger countries like Germany or even the UK. The idea of sending our young men to die in a war to defend our borders of a foreign land when we're not even allowed to defend our own is repugnant. It must never happen. Yeah, that's exactly. All right, last one. Ooh, this one seems negative. Let's hear it. Europe is run down, miserable, expensive, and broken. Nothing works anymore. Even ambulances have to be booked days in advance to take you to a draughty corridor in a dirty hospital with all the windows closed to trap the maximum bugs. I don't know which... This is not accurate to all of Europe, let's be honest. But we are all swerving around potholes and living in cold, run-down buildings full of mold. Meanwhile, some live free in 4-star hotels, warm and well-fed with security and choice of meals. Waste of time dying for this. It's not the country I grew up in. Yeah, well, not all of Europe is like this. But, again, the trend is disturbing. Hey, are you in Europe? What do you think? What is your thoughts on your home country at the moment? Does it feel like there's hope for the future? Does it feel like things are changing a bit? Do you agree with how things are going? All right, just let me know. Why? Or do you not? Thank you, Neil Oliver.